Hello, Tech fans, and welcome into episode 160 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, originating from TSL's High Tech Studios in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. On today's show, we've got a lot to discuss. We will discuss the latest news regarding Virginia Tech football and its roster, analyze the 8-1 start for men's basketball, and discuss wrestling's dominating start to its season. The first podcast of 2021, episode 160 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, gets started right now. Whether you are watching live or archived on YouTube, listening on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or on Stitcher, we have nearly 10 different ways you can consume the Tech Sideline Podcast. However you're watching or listening, we're glad you could join us as we record on Monday, January 4th. We'll have our normal crew here by the end of the podcast, but we begin with our founder and general manager, Will Stewart. To my left, we will soon be joined by our managing editor, Chris Coleman. We do have the best podcast producer in the land behind the scenes. He is Malcolm Stewart, ready to rock and roll in 2021. And I'm your podcast host, Evan Hughes. If you have a question for Will or Chris, it could be football, men's basketball, wrestling, any sport related. Go ahead and drop them in our YouTube chat for those watching live, and I'll be sure to read those at the end of the show. Tech Sideline Podcast is presented by Anytime Fitness, Campus Emporium, and Southeast Regional Training Center. Will, it's great to have our friends at Anytime Fitness a part of the Tech Sideline family in 2021.
Yes, the organization that transformed Chris Coleman. Now we're pretty excited to have Anytime as a sponsor. They'll be on board with us for a few months. I've been going to Anytime since 2016. Not lately, not since COVID started. So my journey is long and twisted, kind of like a lot of people's. So here's what we're going to do. All right. First of all, let's do the promo, and then I'll tell you what's going to happen this year, 2021. All right. So Anytime Fitness, what they're promoting right now is you can get the first month for $1 now through January 11th. And this is Anytime Fitness in Blacksburg. That's the location that we're promoting. But of course, if you're an Anytime Fitness member, you can go to an Anytime anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. So if you're listening to this from Richmond, you're listening to it from Charlottesville, Roanoke, even like the Anytime that I typically go to is the one over in Fairlawn over near Radford. But I will be going to the one here in Blacksburg, and we'll get to that in a second. So now through January 11th, sign up for $1 for the first month. And what they want to promote is their, to me, Anytime's a bit of a Cadillac of a gym. You can go to your local rec center for free. And boy, do I have a story about that I'll tell here in a second. You can go to other chains for $10 a month. But Anytime is a place where it's clean. They keep their equipment updated. They have personal trainers there. If you want to start that, that's something Chris does. Chris does the whole deal.
Y'all, it's unbelievable. Chris Coleman, workout fiend. I mean, he's always working out.
Yeah, I always say that people don't change, but he got to be like 35 years old, and he just decided to be the gym guy. But the other thing I like about Anytime is if you're worried about, you don't want to be in the gym around the meatheads, it's not like that. I see people I know all the time in there, and I've made friends in there. People are very friendly. So the reason, and some of you may have familiarity with this kind of story. The reason I decided to join Anytime in 2016 was that I was going to the Radford Rec Center, which was built in the year 2000. So it's fairly modern. They got a nice free weight room in there. But some of the people that go there are gross. I'll just be upfront about it, And then I remember one morning I got up, did my get up at 6:30 thing. I rolled into the Radford Rec Center at 7:00 in the morning, and they have a fairly decent sized free weight room, which is where I always went in to work out. I prefer free weights. I did at that point in time anyway. And this one particular morning I got there, great. There was nobody there. There was a couple guys over in the corner, talking to each other, working on one of the some lat machine or something. I opened the door, and there were 2 guys in there, like I said, and the entire room smelled like BO. And I said, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to go to an actual gym. So I went and I asked friends, and they recommended Anytime, and went and visited there, and did a little bit of transformation on my body at the time, which, I've since given up. I was doing okay till COVID kicked in. So anyway, they are located in the First and Main Shopping Center in Blacksburg. Call 540-951-1340, 540-951-1340, and ask for Tyler. If you're calling at off hours, Tyler might not be there. He's typically there from, I think, 9 to 5 or so. And I believe that is the entire promo. I feel like there's something I'm forgetting, but that's fine.
I look forward to, every time we do this read, showing the results that can happen when you go to Anytime Fitness. When I look to my left, and Chris Coleman, who, again, will be here.
So I knew I was leaving something out. So January 1st, I weighed 186 pounds, which is the most I've ever weighed. Now, ironically, last January 1st, I also weighed 186 pounds. So I'm going to go down there either later today or tomorrow, and I'm going to do the whole personal training thing.
Just like Chris Coleman?
And you get, no. Chris has way more energy than I've got. I don't, like Chris, 1 or 2 or 3 months into his personal training. So Chris actually trains with Mitchell Ledwick, Mitch, who used to be the punter for Virginia Tech. Mitch threw the famous fake punt in the 2016 ACC championship game. But I remember a couple months into it, Chris coming to me and go, oh yeah, I threw up yesterday. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not working out so hard that I throw up. So I won't be doing that, but you guys are going to travel this journey with me. 186, I'm looking for 165, probably, maybe 160. And man, one time when I was in college, I got thin one summer. I weighed 142 pounds. I can't imagine being 44 pounds lighter than I am right now. Ugh. But enough of that. Anytime, we appreciate Anytime as a sponsor, and y'all are going to be traveling this journey with me. So remember that I'm starting at 186, and we'll do the whole. They got this cool machine where they analyze your body fat and muscle mass and all that stuff. So we'll be walking this journey for the next few months.
It is our first podcast since right before Christmas. It's been about 2.5 weeks. It's our first podcast of the new year. So hope your holiday season was terrific. Hope it was a terrific new year. We're excited for what 2021 holds for us here at Tech Sideline and the Tech Sideline Podcast. On today's show, we're going to talk about 24th ranked men's basketball off to an 8-1 start. As we record on Monday morning, the new AP poll should come out later on Monday, so we expect the Hokies to be ranked higher than 24th. They're off to a terrific start. I'll get Will's thoughts on the job that Mike Young has done. We'll talk about Keve Aluma and other key players that have been a big part of the start for men's basketball. We'll also talk a little bit about 8th ranked Virginia Tech Wrestling. They open up their season on Saturday, dominating win over Campbell. But we begin today talking about Virginia Tech football. And let's start off on a positive note real quick, because I want to talk about the roster here in a moment, Will. But there are a lot of former Virginia Tech football players who are going to be playing in the NFL playoffs coming up next week. And I want to read them off real quick. Kendall Fuller, Logan Thomas, Greg Stroman,
Now,
Tim
wait a minute,
Settle,
read the teams too for guys.
all for the Washington football team.
Okay.
Wyatt Teller for the Cleveland Browns. They're back in the playoffs for the first time in 18 years.
Can I interrupt and just say, how is it that the Dolphins have one of their best teams in like 20 years? They're not in the playoffs, and the Cleveland Browns are.
The Browns won 11 games, though. 11-5.
What'd the Dolphins win?
10-6.
Yep, they wound up one short.
Kyle Fuller and the Bears snuck in as the 7th seed in the NFC. Dwayne Brown and the Seahawks. Tremaine Edmonds and the Bills. And then Terrell Edmonds and the Steelers. So there are a lot of, and the one I do want to point out real quick is Logan Thomas, because he caught a touchdown in the game that Washington had to win last night to win the NFC East. And he had a terrific year. Will, I think he was snubbed of a Pro Bowl. That's how good Logan Thomas was this year.
So do you have his stats in front of you?
I don't. I can pull it up. I do know. I mean, there was one game this year. He caught 13 passes in a single game.
So did they get the story right when they talk about him in college? Did they say that he went to college as a tight end and got converted to a quarterback?
I was watching Sunday Night Football's broadcast, and they talked about how he was a quarterback drafted in the 4th round from Virginia Tech, converted to a tight end. They did not mention how he came in as a tight end at Virginia Tech.
Yeah, and I'm not – honestly, I've actually forgotten the story over the years. I think he maybe thought he was a tight end, and I know the recruiting services thought he was a tight end. But I think when he arrived here at Virginia Tech, their intent the whole time was for him to be a quarterback here. And if I remember correctly, I heard him talk once, and he said he wasn't too sure. But this was after his really good year was 2011 at quarterback, and so I heard him speak after the 2011 season. He said, "Yeah, I think this is working out okay." And another guy, similar story that I'm fascinated by is Jimmy Graham, who is still playing. Right?
He is.
I watched that guy play basketball for Miami for 4 years. And then he decides on a lark, hey, let's play football too. And boom, now he's been a tight end in the NFL for years and years. So I think stories like that are really cool.
Yeah, Logan Thomas this year for the Washington football team, 72 receptions, 670 yards, and 6 touchdowns.
Wow.
So put together, and he's kind of been a backup journeyman tight end up until this year. He's kind of established himself as a number 1 threat. So anyways,
that is awesome.
That's really cool to see, and we'll keep everybody updated on what former Hokies are making a run towards a Super Bowl here in 2021.
So as a Dolphins fan, Miami was good in my youth, and then they were good as long as Dan Marino was there. But the curse of the Dolphins became the Buffalo Bills, that era where the Bills went to 4 Super Bowls. And it always bothered me that the bulk of Bruce Smith's career was spent at an NFL team that I couldn't stand. So, everybody rooted for Bruce, but couldn't really root for him because the better Bruce and the Bills did, it meant the Dolphins weren't going anywhere. And now we're right back there again. They had to win yesterday. They had to beat the Bills to make the playoffs after, 20 years of New England Patriots purgatory. For the AFC
gave up 50 points.
And so they go out there and they get smoked by the Bills, and of course the Bills have a Hokie playing for them, and
yep.
I don't know. History's repeating itself. I'm not digging it.
So that's the good news. I want to start off talking about Virginia Tech football on a high note, and there are some positives to take away from what I'm going to transition into next. And we're going to spend some time taking a look at this Virginia Tech football roster, because since the last time that we've done a podcast, there has been some news of players that have entered into the NFL draft, have entered the transfer portal. There have been some players that have announced they are staying at Virginia Tech. And there have been a couple of players who went into the transfer portal from other schools and have wound up at Virginia Tech. Let's start with those players, though, who are leaving the program. And we have talked about some of these players on previous podcasts, but I'm going to go ahead and go through the players that have entered their names into the NFL draft or have put their names into the transfer portal. Let's start, and these are some of the notables, by the way, but NFL draft: Khalil Herbert, Christian Darrisaw, Divine Diablo, Gerard Hewitt, Rayshard Ashby, and Justice Reed have all entered their names into the 2021 NFL draft process. Hendon Hooker, offensive lineman TJ Jackson, wide receiver Darrell Simmons have entered the transfer portal. Offensive lineman Doug Nestor entered the portal, has transferred to West Virginia. Offensive lineman Brian Hudson has transferred to a fellow ACC school in Louisville. And then quarterback Quincy Patterson has committed to North Dakota State. So those are all the names of players that are either already committed to the NFL draft, are in the portal, or who had entered the portal and have committed to new teams. A lot of names there, Will. But is there a name that surprised you that either declared for the draft or entered the transfer portal?
I don't think there are any surprises there. I'm not surprised by Quincy Patterson going into the transfer portal. People have been talking about that for about a year. And, quarterback, say what you want about the transfer portal. Quarterback is one of those situations where you're going to get a lot of activity there, no matter who you are, because only one guy gets to play, and you and I know that it doesn't always work out that way. Like how many guys played quarterback for Virginia Tech this year? 2. Because Burmeister gets hurt or is ineffective. They bring in Hendon Hooker. Hendon gets hurt or whatever. So there's that thing of back in the day, you take a guy like Dave Meyer. Dave Meyer spent his entire career here as a backup quarterback. Dave would be in the transfer portal pretty early these days, because guys just don't. I don't want to sound critical because I understand the mindset. They don't. When you're young, you don't know if I stay here. If I stay here, is this guy who's in front of me never going to get hurt, never going to transfer? I'm never going to get to play. You don't know, So guys are once the pecking order gets established when they're freshmen or sophomores, they're like, you know what, this is not happening for me here. Like take a guy like Quincy Patterson. Now, I don't know that I have not seen an article with Quincy saying why he went into the portal. I just know that he's been here for a few years. And every time they bring him in, unless they have to try to win the football game, like they kind of gave him the whole suite in the Notre Dame game in 2019. They let him throw the ball. They let him run the ball. For the most part, when Quincy Patterson comes in, he's just running the football. Now in the NC State game, they let him throw it some also. But he just seemed to be stuck in that pattern where when they did bring him in, they were just, letting him run the football or hand it off or whatever. So I get that he wants to go somewhere and try to develop and get some playing time, I just I don't know what would have happened if he had stayed here. So what year is Quincy? Was this his redshirt sophomore season?
I believe it was redshirt sophomore, correct.
Yeah. So he's got everybody this year has an extra year of eligibility. So Quincy actually has 3 more years to play. And, I get it. But even that was not a surprise.
2 names. Actually, let's go to the ones that have declared for the NFL draft. Nobody's surprised by Khalil Herbert the year that he had.
Right.
Christian Darrisaw is a projected first-round pick.
Right.
Divine Diablo had a standout year. Justice Reed's been in college, it feels like, for the last 10 years. Totally understand that. And Gerard Hewitt and Rayshard Ashby have had great moments in their careers. Yeah. They're seniors. Were you surprised that they entered the NFL draft and did not come back for another year?
No. I actually, I don't remember. I think it was the Miami game. I parked in lot 2. That's where media was parking this year. And there was a really sweet Dodge Ram pickup truck, brand new, and there were a couple guys sitting in it. And I walked up to him and said, man, I like that truck. So we got to talking. Turns out it was Gerard Hewitt's dad and brother. So, and to this day, I think his dad's name is Steve, and for some reason I did not get Steve's cell phone number. That's not very good journalistic instincts. But they told me at that time that he was wrestling with it, that the coaching staff really wanted him to come back, but he wasn't sure, and Gerard is a guy that has worked very, very hard his entire time here. And I guess he feels it's just time to move on. Now, if Gerard Hewitt were to make an NFL roster, that'd be a big surprise. He's a guy with a high motor who works very hard, but he doesn't have an NFL body. He is not 6'2", 6'3", 325. NFL defensive tackle, super athletic, all that stuff. I wish him luck. He doesn't strike me as an NFL guy. So I think this is more about just wanting to get off the treadmill and not do the grind anymore.
I want to talk about Rayshard Ashby for a second. Somebody who's from Richmond, graduate of L.C. Byrd High School, had a terrific year, I guess now 2 seasons ago, Bud Foster's final season. He came in to this 2020 season. He was all preseason ACC and just didn't quite follow up like he did 2 years ago this season for Virginia Tech. What kind of legacy does he leave? When you think about Rayshard Ashby, his time at Virginia Tech, what comes to mind?
That's an interesting question. I feel like ever since I'm sitting here thinking there were some middle linebackers, some Mike linebackers under Bud Foster that I feel that everyone else is always compared to. And for me, those guys are George Del Rico. George Del Rico set the tone. When the defense changed in 1993, Del Rico, I believe he started in 93. I know he started in 94 and 95. I'm not sure he would play at this level today because he wasn't a physical specimen, but he was just a tremendous football player. Then you had, I believe it was Michael Hawks, played the Mike position during the 96 to 99 years. And then, of course, Vince Hall. Vince Hall is the one who set the standard at the position. And so I feel like everybody to come after those guys, I'm always in my mind comparing them to George Del Rico and Vince Hall. And everybody comes up short because I think Vince never had a shot at the NFL. But that tandem of him with Xavier Adibi was just, if you want two college linebackers, those are your guys, particularly in Bud Foster's system. So I think Rayshard will be remembered as a guy who was a solid, consistent performer at a time when so much was changing around him. So many guys, the defense was so young, particularly I think it was 2018 where they got blown out a few times. But he was a steadying influence, and he was a guy they could count on. I also don't think he's a guy who has a shot at the NFL. It's disappointing that he didn't have a better year in 2020. And that's old tired ground. We've covered it. I think that COVID did him wrong, and he came back not in good shape. It was interesting. The other day I watched. I was messing around on my DVR, and I noticed the 2018 season opener against Florida State. And the Tech defense had a really, really good game. And I remember I watched one play in particular where Florida State ran to the edge, and Khalil Adler sniffed it out and cut it off. And Ashby broke through the line and was pursuing the running back. I don't remember who the running back was. But the guy stopped, and Ashby stopped right with him and turned on a dime and made the tackle. And I was struck by that because we haven't seen him make a play like that in a while. Just the ability to change direction. And the other thing is with the new defensive scheme that I remember, and I think this actually came up in conversation with Gerard Hewitt's dad and brother, and they said that it just the drop that was required for the Mike linebacker in Justin Hamilton's scheme is not something that Rayshard was comfortable with and was able to execute well. So it's a shame that he didn't have a better year, but I think he'll be remembered. When you talk about great Mike linebackers in Virginia Tech history, I don't know that his name is going to come up. Everybody will still go to Vince Hall. But he was, like I said, a stabilizing force when Virginia Tech football really needed it.
For those wanting us to discuss Hendon Hooker, if you go back to our previous podcast, we talked about Hendon Hooker because it came up actually as we were live, and we talked about it for 20 to 25 minutes.
Yeah.
So if you want to get Chris and Will's thoughts, we invite you to go back to episode 159 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Great discussion on that. Let's talk about some players that are staying in Blacksburg, though, Will, because Justin Fuente and company got a couple of key players to stick around for next season. And let's start with James Mitchell, the tight end who, as Andy Bitter pointed out, his 16.73 yards per catch was number one in the ACC amongst tight ends this past year. He is staying in Blacksburg. He's a guy that you can line up in the slot. We've seen him take some jet sweeps. He blocks well. He's a friendly target for quarterbacks in the red zone. Just how important was it for Virginia Tech to keep a guy like Mitchell in Blacksburg for another season?
I think that's really huge. Gallo and Dulius, and I'm not sure who else they've got in the pipeline. We can go to the roster page and look at it. James Mitchell is a better receiver than those guys. And I felt like if he had left, that's what they would have been missing at the tight end position. And if you had asked me prior to him making that decision, like if you had asked me the week before the UVA game, what do you think James Mitchell's going to do? I said, well, I think he's going to go pro. I know he had a little issue with his knee this year. I don't know how serious it was. But he performed well anyway. And he's a good blocker, good receiver. So you ask yourself the question, how can he improve his draft stock by coming back another year? I'm not entirely sure how. It sounds like he got some feedback that, there were things he needed to do. The one thing I'd like to see James Mitchell do, and we've talked about this, we've talked about buy-in to strength and conditioning about other players. James is, when they list how, like, do you have his height and weight listed there? when they talk about how much he weighs, I'm always surprised by that. He doesn't look like he weighs that much. So what I'd like to see from him in the coming year is 5 or 10 more pounds and just look more cut and really start to look like an NFL body while he's still in college. But I don't know. We've seen clips where, he can get down the field, like you said, in the slot, outside. They've done all kinds of stuff with him. I know there are times where I can't evaluate James Mitchell as a blocker, the whole body of work. But I know there are times where I've seen him block well. So I think it's an interesting decision, and I wonder if you had asked me, I'd have said, nah, he's going to go pro.
6'3", 242.
How about 250 or 255? With definition in the arms. So that's the thing I would lay down for him is he's got all the tools in the toolbox. Just work on the body and continue to develop the craft. But I think that one's more surprising than one that we talked about earlier, choosing to not stay.
So I feel like the last couple of years, when we talk about depth at certain positions for Virginia Tech football, the two position groups we talk about were wide receiver and linebacker. And now you go into 2021, Will, and I feel like the unit that might have the most depth is the tight end room for Virginia Tech. You can make the argument for offensive line.
Because nothing's changing, right?
Correct. You've got Dulius, you've got Gallo, and you've got Mitchell all returning. And I think you can make the case that that's the best tight end group of any school in the ACC returning for next year.
Yeah, and so first of all, there's a difference between bodies and depth. I feel like Virginia Tech had a ton of bodies at wide receiver, but just not depth. There's been a lot of churn at the wide receiver position. I felt like, was it the end of the 2019 season where Grimsley, Phil Patterson, you can probably remember other names I'm forgetting right now.
Those are the two big ones.
Those are put their name in the portal. Hazelton.
Oh, yeah. Huh.
That group had depth until it got gutted by those three guys choosing to transfer out. I think this year they have bodies, but I don't think they really had depth. They wouldn't throw the ball to Changa Hodges and Evan Fairs. They wouldn't throw it to them. So yes, you look at tight ends, you got James Mitchell, Nick Gallo, Drake Dulius.
And Dulius was serviceable at times. I really do think those are three very capable tight ends.
Evan Dulius is a guy. You talk about guys that you wouldn't have been surprised if they transferred out. This was his redshirt junior year, so this is 4th season, right?
6'5", 240, redshirt junior from Charlotte, North Carolina.
And he has not been a part of the offense until basically this year. And so that's a guy that's been very patient and has put the time in and put the work in. And somebody answered the phone. So I think it's great, and I think it's great that he's coming back, and he can come back as a redshirt junior next year and have 2 more years if he wants them. So that would be awesome if this is his time. Then you got Wilfred Panay, which I think, I could ask Chris about this. I think they see Panay as a tight end. That's where we've got him listed on our roster projection. And he's a big, rangy guy, a good athlete. And then, of course, you got Jack Hollyfield, January enrollee, and Jared Gibble, January enrollee. So they're going to have a lot of bodies and I think decent depth.
Will, you ready to put your hands together?
For what?
Ladies and gentlemen.
For the arrival of Chris Coleman.
Chris Coleman. His first podcast of 2021. He's back on the set.
So, have y'all already talked about wrestling?
No, we have not.
You should have talked about wrestling first when I wasn't here, because I know nothing about that.
Well, we can talk about wrestling after the break, so you can
CC, Happy New Year, sir. How are you doing?
I'm all right, man. How are you?
Good. We're in the middle, for those that are just joining us, episode 160 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We've got the whole crew here now. Our first show of 2021. Evan Hughes, Chris Coleman, Will Stewart, and Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes. We've been talking about the changes in the Virginia Tech football roster here over the last couple of weeks. We talked about those that have put their names into the transfer portal, those that have declared for the NFL draft. Mm-hmm. And we were just discussing how arguably the position group with the most depth heading into next year could be the tight ends with James Mitchell, Drake Dulius, and Nick Gallo.
Yeah, and Dulius played a little more than people expected this year, and probably generally played better than people would have expected. So Virginia Tech will have 3 experienced tight ends on the roster next year. Let's go ahead and get this word out of the way early. Should be able to redshirt Jack Holyfield and Jared Gibble without much of an issue, I would think.
Real quick.
Panay, somebody said on the boards the other day, Wilfred Panay is a defensive end.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know that for a fact. Tech hasn't announced it, but if so, I like that move because I liked his film better as a defensive end.
Did you?
Really explosive coming off the edge.
Well, with Mitchell staying, maybe that makes them able to put Panay over defensive end. I don't know. I'm sure there are some hot debates about how to decide that stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's just incredible that you've walked in and within 60 seconds the word redshirt has come out of your mouth. So off to a great start. Real quick, tell our listeners and viewers, what's the background on your Twitter? I saw this last night.
Oh, gosh. Somebody on our boards, I forget who, would occasionally throw it into threads when we were talking about redshirting. And
Looks like Alec Baldwin.
Yeah, I don't know what movie
in front of a
it's from.
chalkboard, and it says always red shirt.
It says always be redshirting.
And I don't know what the third word was in the movie.
What movie is that from?
I don't know. Whoever did the graphic for you got rid of the third word and put in red shirt.
Right. So I don't know what movie that's from, to be honest with you. I just grabbed it off our board.
There you go. If anyone needs a good laugh, at Chris Coleman TSL, go check out his background. Chris always loves to try in red shirt. Okay, let's discuss the other player who's announced he is staying at Virginia Tech, and that's defensive end Emmanuel Belmar Jr. Chris, somebody who has experience. Defensive line took strides this past season. How do you see Belmar fitting into the scheme next year?
Well, right now I would project him to start. He was having a good season before he got hurt. And I believe he was.
I remember he was playing surprisingly well.
But he was like the second highest graded defender when he got hurt. I don't know. I don't know where he ended up on that list.
He was becoming more of a playmaker.
Yeah, and making fewer mistakes. So yeah, he was having a good year. So I would anticipate. I would anticipate him starting. I don't know if he's ever played left defensive end before. Obviously, he's been starting on right defensive end. So I mean, somebody's going to have to play left. So
the candidates are Belmar, Amari Barno, Taiwan Garbett.
Mm-hmm. Garbett has played on the left.
Yeah, and maybe Jalen Griffin.
Well, Barno's starting, right?
You would think so.
Right. So it's going to come down to where does Barno feel the most comfortable is what it's going to come down to.
I want him to feel comfortable in the weight room.
Yeah, exactly.
Harping on that point.
Griffin has played both sides. I would have to go back and look and see if Barno played both sides at any point this past season. But generally speaking, I think he was on the right.
All right, so we've talked about those that are leaving the program. Those are two names that are important for Virginia Tech that are staying, and James Mitchell and Emmanuel Belmar. And then the Hokies have been somewhat active in the transfer portal themselves in terms of bringing in players. Virginia Tech announced that Tay Daly has announced that he is transferring into Virginia Tech, a safety from Vanderbilt. He was the Commodore's third leading tackler in 2019, entered the portal in September, someone who's made 17 career starts. He'll be a senior in the fall. Will with Divine Diablo entering the NFL draft, and while we don't know what Devin Taylor's future necessarily holds, how important was it for Virginia Tech and Justin Hamilton to go out and get an experienced safety that could come in and play right away?
Well, clearly important, and who knows, they may not be done. Chris and I talked about Daly, and he opted out before the season started, right?
Yep.
So I'm not sure he had a choice but to transfer away from Vanderbilt, because if you opted out at the beginning of the season and your teammates went through all of that, the swab up the nose 3 times a week and playing in front of empty stadiums, how do you come back and say, hey, guys,
I hope you guys had fun. I had a good time not going through everything that you went through.
Right.
And I got my extra year too, right?
Yeah. So what is Daly's size?
I don't have it in front of me.
He's about 6 foot 200 thereabouts.
Okay, so he's no Divine Diablo.
No, he has played corner, safety, strong safety, free safety, pretty much everything in the secondary at Vanderbilt.
Right. So at that size, who knows?
He had a really good sophomore season at Vanderbilt. I mean, really, really good. Did not have a good junior season. I don't know what happened. He dropped off big time. I don't know if they had a coordinator change. I know just looking at his stuff on Pro Football Focus, it was like he played different positions, different games would be his primary position, and just like depending on where he's needed on a week-to-week basis. So hopefully Tech can get him in here and decide on a position. early and stick to that position, which I would guess would be.
All we know about Devin Taylor is that he did not participate in the senior day ceremonies. Do you remember?
He got invited to the Shrine Bowl as if they're actually going to have a Shrine Bowl, right? I'm pretty sure he's coming back.
Yeah.
And Devin Taylor is somebody who has played a little bit of corner, played a little bit of safety as well, correct?
Yeah. Taylor is not. To me, Taylor's a replaceable player because he's not a good tackler.
Mm-hmm.
No, maybe in a year where
they actually get to practice,
and so many guys out with COVID this past season. If you're a coach, you don't want to lose even more guys to injuries, right? So one of the first things you cut is contact drills. So believe it or not, Virginia Tech couldn't tackle this past year, right? That was a bad tackling team. Well, guess what? It was the 6th best tackling team in the ACC.
In the 15-team ACC. Well, although Notre Dame would not have been included in PFF stats, right?
That's right.
So
6 out of
14.
So top half. So nobody could tackle very well this year.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to judge him too bad, but he just didn't look like he didn't look aggressive enough for me for a safety. So I'm not saying he's not replaceable either. You just need some competition in there, man. I swear I go into this offseason and I tell everybody, the depth chart is a clean slate. The initial spring depth chart will be set by who works the hardest in the off-season strength and conditioning.
And that includes the weight room.
Yes, specifically the weight room. That's pretty much what all the off-season is the weight room. So you go to Ben Hilgert and you ask who worked the hardest in the weight room, and he tells you, and that's your depth chart when spring practice rolls out, right? So that's how you set that.
I am not going to talk about Frank Beamer and Mike Gentry. I'm not going to talk about Frank Beamer. I'm not going to do that.
So the Hokies have added 2 players from the transfer portal. Again, that's Tate Daly, safety from Vanderbilt. Again, the 3rd leading tackler in 2019 for the Commodores. The other big addition for Virginia Tech out of the transfer portal, 6'1", 305-pound offensive lineman Johnny Jordan will be in Blacksburg in the fall. The former Maryland Terrapin started 17 games for the Terps. All Big Ten, honorable mention as a center, someone who's had over 1,200 snaps in his career. And as Chris pointed out in his article, Pro Football Focus rated him as the 3rd highest center in the Big Ten this past year. So Chris, Doug Nestor, Brian Hudson have left. Christian Darrisaw is going to likely be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. Where do you see Johnny Jordan plugging himself into this offensive line next year?
He most likely starts at center. He's a really, really technically sound player, but he's also the smallest offensive lineman. And generally, your smallest offensive linemen are best fit at center because you generally don't have somebody lined up directly over top of them, unless they're playing like an old school,
old school
3-4, yeah, exactly. So I think he's at center. Brock Hoffman moves to right guard, and Hoffman started at right guard, I believe, when he was a sophomore at Coastal Carolina, or maybe when he was a freshman, but I don't know. But he started a whole year at there before. So those are the question mark was at right guard, and I think it's going to be filled by Brock Hoffman. But the recruiting of Johnny Jordan at center will allow Brock Hoffman to slide over, and I'm kind of excited about that move for Brock Hoffman. He doesn't at right guard. He doesn't have to worry about snapping the ball. He doesn't have to worry about setting protections and all this and all that. He can just focus.
Yeah. What can you tell us about his grades? Because people, he had some key penalties and people started ragging on him. And my thing is that guy, the attitude he brought to the offensive line to me is very important.
It is, yes.
Yeah. But how did he grade out?
He was, I think, number 6 in the ACC for centers. Johnny Jordan was the number 3 center in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
4 games. Limited schedule Maryland played.
That's true. But it was all quality opposition. Those grades were not accumulated.
Well, Penn State, he did well against them, right? Granted, everybody did well against Penn State the first half.
For the first 5 games.
So I think Tech will be fine there. No, don't get me wrong. I would. Doug Nestor will always bother me.
Yeah.
This was a guy who was on the fast track to being an NFL offensive lineman, starting. And he walks away from that situation.
Yeah.
Like, what if he goes to West Virginia and I say this as a what if because I don't think this will be the case. I think he will be developed well. But what if he's not? What if he just left a situation where he was being developed very well and he's not as developed as well at his next spot and it costs him money in the future?
Yeah.
I don't think that'll be the case, but it's always possible. So that one's always going to bother me because you're going to see his name on draft day and you're going to see him on Monday Night Football when all the players say their name and then the college they're from. He's going to say Doug Nestor, West Virginia.
Well, in the same way that watching Mekhi Becton develop at Louisville and
except Mekhi Becton never played at Virginia.
Well, I know, and that's the difference,
Yeah.
But he did graduate from Lauren Johnson's high school,
He
right?
did.
Yeah.
Highland Springs.
Yeah, and Becton's one of those guys. To be quite honest with you, like it was easy to miss on Becton. You just don't. I was talking to a former Virginia Tech offensive lineman about this, and Becton in high school was just bigger than everybody.
I covered him in high school.
I mean, you can't tell if that guy's going to be any good when he gets to college or not. The defensive ends he was blocking were like 190 pounds.
Yeah.
I mean,
he played my high school. You're not wrong.
So the defensive ends weigh 4 pounds more than I do right now.
Right.
You know, by the way, Becton did as a New York Jet. He was one of the lone bright spots of the year for the Jets as a first-round pick. Wow. So, but anyways, back to the point that Johnny Jordan is someone who's going to be able to come in and help Virginia Tech with 3 starting offensive linemen departing in this offseason. So, again, we just spent about 45 minutes going through all of the news of players that have entered the portal, have entered the NFL draft, players that are staying, and players that Virginia Tech has added. 1 sport down and 2 left to go. We're going to talk about men's basketball, an 8-1 start for Mike Young's squad in year number 2, an 8th-ranked Virginia Tech wrestling with a big start to their season against Campbell. We're off and running our first podcast of the new year. We'll step aside for a break. When we come back, we transition from the gridiron to the hardwood on episode 160 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Welcome back into episode 160 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, presented by Anytime Fitness, Campus Emporium, and the Southeast Regional Training Center. Great to have you back with us. Evan Hughes alongside of Chris Coleman, Will Stewart, Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes. Don't forget, if you have a question for Will or Chris, we'll get to them at the end of the show. It could be football, men's basketball, wrestling, or movie related, as a lot of you have been chiming in with movies in the comment section today.
Really?
Yes, because we got a title on the movie of Alec Baldwin.
Oh, thank you.
Which was Always Be Closing.
Okay.
Glenn Gary Ross, famous line is Always Be Closing. So
I've heard that line.
Glenn Ross.
Eric Fisher says, anyone else not surprised Evan hadn't seen it?
I've never seen it either.
Eric goes, yeah, but I knew Evan hadn't seen it. I'm surprised at Chris, disappointed in Will. So there's been a lot of talk about movies early on. But we've got a lot more to get through.
So can we talk about Wonder Woman 84? Man, I thought that was bad. I just
did not see it.
So I'm interested in people's feedback in the comments there. Did you like that movie? Because I did not like that movie. Spoiler alert, I won't get into it. Let's move on.
Let's talk about Virginia Tech men's basketball, because, again, we're recording on Monday morning, January 4th. By the time you might be listening or watching to this Monday night, Tuesday morning, I believe the ranking is going to be higher, but the 24th ranked Virginia Tech men's basketball team, an 8-1 start, had their game against Virginia on January 2nd postponed due to COVID-19 in the Virginia program, but a really good start in the 2020 part of the season for Virginia Tech.
So one comment about the COVID thing, it's been my perception watching that, in football, when you had guys test positive or get caught by contact tracing, you could still kind of put it together and play a game. It appears to me like in the case of UVA, Evan, wasn't it a case of COVID like on a staffer?
I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that is what the wording
was. If you get one case, a player or a staffer, it just you don't even play the game. So it's not like football. It's having a much more profound effect, I think.
It's having a much more profound effect. I assume that's because the games are indoors and the players are right up in each other's faces for the entire game, right?
Yeah.
Football, you're in each other's face for like 5 seconds, and then you walk back to the huddle, and you're outdoors, right?
And the other thing that might be feeding the perception is the fact that there are so many more basketball games.
Right.
And I'm getting the emails all the time from the ACC. This game's been postponed. This game's been postponed. Here's some schedule changes. And I get the emails for men's basketball and women's basketball. So it just seems like a lot.
All right, just wait until – I don't think most people have thought about this, and maybe I'll end up being wrong. Wait till the NCAA tournament and teams have to forfeit NCAA tournament games. Because if you have a COVID problem the first round of the NCAA tournament – because the NCAA tournament, it's all being held in the same city. You can't afford to wait 7 to 10 days for your program to restart.
And they haven't said a word about like.
So no, it's going to be forfeits. There's going to be teams get to the Elite Eight because the Sweet 16 opponent had to forfeit because you can't wait a week to play that game.
Right.
Otherwise, I mean, it would take the NCAA tournament would still be going on in like June.
Right.
If you postpone the whole tournament because certain teams have to miss their games. No, it's going to have to be forfeits, and it might be the same thing at the ACC tournament. I mean, so don't take this season too seriously.
Well, with that, let's take it one day at a time, like a lot of programs around the country have been, and let's recap. 8-1 for Virginia Tech in the 2020 part of their season. Wins over Radford, number 3 Villanova, South Florida, VMI, number 24 at the time Clemson, Coppin State, Longwood, and Miami. Their lone loss was the ACC Big Ten Challenge, 20-point home loss to Penn State. Professor Stewart, Professor Coleman, get your grade books out. What grade would you give Virginia Tech in the 2020 part of the season thus far?
On the whole, I would go with a B plus maybe.
They've been wildly inconsistent.
The thing is, they were, you play great for 40 minutes against Villanova. You play bad for 40 minutes against Penn State. The concerning part for me is I don't think they've played 40 minutes of basketball since since Connecticut. They played well against USF too.
Right.
But since then, you could argue that they did against Clemson, and Clemson is they just make games ugly. That's just their style of play. So, maybe they did against Clemson, but they certainly didn't against Miami. They certainly didn't against Longwood or who was the other?
Coppin State.
Coppin State. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. Either they're starting slow or they're finishing slow. Or in the Miami game, that they started slow and finished slow, and then they dominated the middle.
In between. Yeah.
Right, and that was a Miami team.
Missing 4 stars.
Yeah. I mean, I thought highly of Miami coming into the season. I thought they had a really, really good team, but you talk off 4 starters from anybody's team, and they're not going to be very good.
And
right?
they still, if that game had been another 2 minutes long,
I know. They've still got skilled talent on there. They just don't have much experience.
Right.
Isaiah Wong is probably as good as any guard in the league, I would say. That guy can really fill it up. And if he had McGusty and Likes, but man, that'd be a one dynamic backcourt. So that's got me concerned about Tech, is the consistency of the performances.
And I think it's been my perception that they've kind of struggled against the zone.
It's weird. Villanova, I think it was Nova threw a zone at them, or maybe it was USF. I don't remember, but I think it was Nova. Let's just say it was Nova. Nova threw a zone at them for like 3 straight possessions, and Tech broke it easily and scored, I think, on all the possessions. Got easy shots, easy jumpers, but hasn't gone that well since. In
other news, I'm getting a huge man crush on Hunter Couture.
With all the charges he's taking?
It's not just that, but he looks to me to be one of Tech's more consistent players. I think he's sneaky good defensively. I don't know about his one-on-one ability if somebody's trying to take him to the rack, but he has very active hands. He gets in the passing lanes. His defensive anticipation is excellent. He probably averages drawing a charge a game. He's just a sophomore, correct?
True sophomore, and he'll be a sophomore again next year.
He's shooting 46% from 3. And he's averaging 7.3 points per game.
I mean, when he makes his threes, he doesn't rattle them in.
By the way, he's also your backup point guard.
Yeah.
Not Jalen Cone. Just because Jalen Cone is 5'9" or 5'10" doesn't mean he's a point guard. If you've seen the last couple games, ever since Jada opted out, It's been, when Beatty hasn't been in the game, it's been Couture bringing the ball up the court and initiating the offense, because you're wasting Jalen Cone's shooting ability with him in that role. So, honestly, he's Brian Chase. If you're an old school is probably not the right word, or maybe it is. Chase played at Tech from around 99 through 2003, so about 20 years. And he was a 5'10" shooting guard. And everybody assumed, oh, he's 5'10", he's a point guard. No, he just happens to be a really, really short shooting guard, and that's what Jalen Cone is.
Overreaction or not an overreaction, that Cartier Jada is a big loss for this team with him opting out.
I don't feel like we got to see him enough to be able to answer the question. What we were told is that he's a guy who, when it's late in the shot clock, can take the ball to the rim. I don't know that we saw a whole lot of that. And
we saw it some,
but I think you'll start to ask yourself that question if they're struggling against a zone or struggling just at the end of the shot clock. You'll think to yourself, man, what
God,
if
I wish we had Jada. Yeah. Right. I see. The thing is, I don't think the offense itself was running as well when he was here, which is understandable.
I would agree with that.
Which is understandable because he's never run it before, and he didn't even get goodness knows what kind of a preseason he got. I don't know anything about what teams were allowed to do and what they weren't allowed to do before the season started. So, brand new system for him. It's almost like when you transfer as a senior into a unique offensive system, it's almost kind of like you have to unlearn everything you learned the previous 3 years, and then you start learning the new system. So he just didn't look comfortable running the offense to me. Now he might have been a totally different guy by February. He might have. So it's hard to say.
I think anybody who says, "Man, we really miss him," is just making stuff up in their mind because you just don't know.
Yeah. We might not.
Yeah.
Keve Aluma is averaging 16 points per game and nearly 7 rebounds per game. That leads the team in both categories. Chris, have you been surprised at how good he's been game in and game out?
Yes. I thought he would be a good player for Tech. I thought he'd be a good rebounder. I didn't anticipate him being a double-digit scorer. Well, it's good player development, and it's sort of like Zach Lede. Zach Lede transfers to Virginia Tech. He'd average like 3 points a game for South
Never
Florida.
Never saw it coming.
Never saw that coming at all. He has to sit out and redshirt a year. And it's a similar comparison here. Keve Aluma, he averaged more than 3 points a game against Wofford. I think he averaged 6 and 6 as a sophomore there. But then he comes here, sits out a year, redshirts, has developed. Red shirts and develops. Gosh. Point proven. But no, I didn't see it coming. But you have to understand that in basketball, in sports in general, guys develop at different rates. Just because a guy isn't dominant his first couple of years doesn't mean you need to give up on him and everything like that.
Yeah, I just think when you look at the team overall, I think they're going to be inconsistent this year, and people need to not get carried away with there are going to be other games like the Penn State game. Not exactly like that, because Penn State.
I don't know that any team's going to shoot the way Penn State shot that game, though. Holy moly!
That's one of the.
Fortunately, Tech gets to play all ACC teams from here on out, not any more Big Ten teams.
That was a snowball that got rolling downhill, But they will lose games by Tech will lose games by 15 and 20 points. It'll happen.
Yeah, and look, here's the thing: like everybody's going to be, not everybody, but Gonzaga won't be, I guess. But most teams are going to be inconsistent to a certain extent this year. This is the second time UVA's had to shut down, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if their program shut down right now, but
it might have been another program that caused them to miss a game.
Well, no,
they
shut their own program down back in December.
They missed the Michigan State game because of it.
They missed that game. They had to postpone the Wake Forest game. Wake Forest at one point was 2-0, and everybody else had played like 6 games because all of Wake's opponents kept shutting down their programs. It was bad luck.
Right.
But yeah, so Virginia, I think Virginia went like 3 weeks without playing a game. And then they came back and played William & Mary and Gonzaga and Notre Dame. And they just feel like they're maybe getting their groove back. And boom, they miss another game. Right? So, like, Virginia this year is probably going to be capped because they just haven't been able to do as much as everybody else in the last month. Right? And goodness knows, maybe they could get shut down again. Who knows? We all could get shut down.
Yeah.
Virginia Tech is supposed to play Louisville tomorrow night. right?
Wednesday night.
Wednesday night. I assume the game's going to happen, but I don't know. Right? Like, what if it doesn't? What if Tech ends up missing 2 or 3 games in a row? And then you lose your rhythm, and then you come back and start playing again, and bam, here's Duke.
Hunter Couture never loses his rhythm.
Yeah.
Hey, one player I do want to bring up quickly. We talk about Keve Aluma, but somebody against Miami, a positive in that seesaw affair that came down to a final shot of 3 that rattled
Justin
in and
Mutz.
out. Justin Mutz. You hit the nail on the head. He had a season-high 15 points in the win over Miami. And when I look at this team, Will, I see a lot of depth. You talked about the difference between bodies and depth earlier, and I see a lot of depth.
Yeah.
But when if you had to ask me who I think an X factor is that elevates Virginia Tech's ceiling, to me, it's Justin Mutz. If he can play Will, I feel like he can elevate this team to even greater heights.
What did he wind up shooting in that game?
Don't know what he had shooting.
He made 3 3-pointers.
Because he started out like 2 of 7. He was very aggressive the whole game, but at first, he made it. He hit a 3 early.
He was 5 of 11, 3 of 5 from the deep.
Right, and I think he made 3 of his last 4, all 3 of his last 3 shots. So I think at one point he was 2 of 7. That's a number that sticks in my mind, which may or may not be right. He started out by making a 3, and I think that made him decide, I'm just going to try to do it all, and it wound up being a good game statistically. But I remember at one point thinking, whoa, settle down there, man, But if he can bottle what he did, I think in the last like 25 minutes of the game. And Chris, isn't he a guy that he's a guy that can play inside out? He's not specifically inside or specifically outside.
Oh, he was not expected to be a 3-point threat at all.
Yeah.
He was 2 of 19 his whole career before coming to Tech.
But he's also, if I recall correctly, driving into the lane and taking the ball to the rim. And it's I think X factor is the best way to describe it.
Is that fair?
I'd say he's a guy who's developed steadily through his whole career, right? Yeah.
Is he the one who's on the 3rd team?
Correct.
13.
Started at High Point, went to Delaware, and now at
So
Virginia Tech.
he's gone low major, mid major, high major.
Yeah.
So he's made 3 steps up during the course of his career.
Because if Aluma's playing well, Chris, down low, and then you throw Mutz down there as well. I mean, I'm sure that opens up the guards as well.
It certainly helps. I think it helps having so many guys on your roster who can score in double figures. If they really wanted to, Virginia Tech could put 5 players on the court at the same time that are all capable of scoring in double figures in any given night, right? All right, so Aluma and Mutz, that's your power forward and your center. And then you could put Couture, Jalen Cohn, Naheem Aline out there. And all those guys are capable of scoring in double figures in any given night. So I think it helps when you have that many scoring options and you have so many different lineup options. I'm really a big fan of the versatility of this roster that Mike Young has built in such a short amount of time. In a way, gosh, I forget who said this on the board. It was either GC Hokie 34 or Seville Hoops. In a way, it was like a blessing in disguise that almost everybody left when Buzz left, because Mike Young had the complete freedom to just build the roster back up the way he.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Now Buzz did too, but that's because Buzz just got rid of everybody. Look, it's a lot easier in basketball when you only have 13 scholarship players. It's a lot easier, quite honest, to tear it down and start from scratch than it is to rebuild something.
Particularly if you come in and the roster's not full to begin with.
Right, exactly.
There's like 10 guys there.
And there's guys that you didn't coach. It's like a programmer coming in trying to fix somebody else's code. And everybody, code is code, but at the same time, everybody has different ways of doing things, right? So that programmer comes in and takes a look at the old programmer's code, and we've run into this on TSL before.
It's called refactoring.
Right, refactoring. And he comes in and looks at the code and is like, this code is 15 years old. It doesn't make any sense. I could fix it. It's going to take me longer to fix than it is to just tear it all down and start my own code.
Yeah, we've gone through both of those on Tech Sideline on the message boards in particular. At one point, our message boards were about 75,000 lines of code, but a lot of that code was cut and pasted and repeated. Mm-hmm. So you put that stuff in subroutines and you just call it, and over time, the programmers whittled it down to somewhere between 15 and 25,000 lines of code.
Right.
Versus this code is crap. I'm going to completely rewrite it.
That's why our boards are faster now than they used to be.
Yes, and let's not. I could talk about that for a while. But one of the things I like about this team is that there are 3 guys on this team that I can think of right off the top of my head that to me have no fear, and that's Jalen Cone. He's putting it up. Hunter Couture, he's putting it up, and Tyrese Radford. His no fear is a different kind of no fear. He just, man, that guy, he's the Jamon Gordon type. I love that guy. I love having that guy on my team. I just wanted to get that out there. That's 3 guys.
There's only 2 players that's averaging over double figures a game, and that's Keve Aluma with 16, and that's Tyrese Radford with just over 10 points a game. So he's not afraid to go dunk over anybody, and that was not just the Wake Forest game last year. That was proven in the Clemson game this year, that and one dunk he had in the first half over one of their forwards. So
and so speaking of dunking, Jalen Cone's he's had 2 opportunities in the open court this year and has chosen not to dunk it.
Did he dunk one last year?
Jalen Cone can dunk.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's a great athlete.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to bring up, you guys, when we first brought up basketball on this podcast, you guys were talking about how this team's been inconsistent. But you look at the ACC right now, and I know we can talk about...
It's not good.
We can talk about how we don't know what the ACC tournament's going to look like, and I know you could take this question I'm about to ask and say, well, we don't know what the tournament's going to look like, NCAA tournament. But this is the AP poll that was last updated last Monday. Again, for those that are listening Monday afternoon, evening, there could be a brand new poll that could have Virginia Tech as the highest ranked team in the ACC, potentially, because that's what John Rothstein of CBS Sports, I read his top 45 this morning. Mm-hmm. He has Virginia Tech ranked as the highest ACC team at 17th, and he said that Keve Aluma is the most underrated transfer of any player in college basketball this year. So let me go through the AP poll that's current right now, though. FSU number 18, Duke number 20, Virginia number 23, and Virginia Tech number 24. Can the makeup of this team that shoots a lot of threes at a high percentage, can this Virginia Tech team win an ACC championship?
Not at this point in their evolution. Earlier in the podcast when we were talking, I was just thinking about how bad the ACC is. And I wish, and how many times have you said this kind of thing? Really, any fan of any team can say this kind of thing. I wish we had next year's team this year, because we have been cautioned by our in-house guru, GC Hokie 34, just settle down. It's a work in progress. They're really not going to hit their rhythm this year. Hopefully it'll happen next year.
He's right, but I don't think he's necessarily taken into account how bad the ACC is, though.
But you have to be consistent. Well, you have to get hot, I guess,
yeah,
to win a championship.
You have to do is get hot, and I think Tech matches up better with Florida State more this year than they have in the past. But I still don't think Florida State. If
Virginia Tech can get into an ACC tournament where they don't have to play Florida State,
right? If somebody could knock out Florida State for us, that would be beneficial. That said, I think Florida State, despite their loss to, gosh, who was it that beat them? I forget who beat them.
I can't remember.
But I think they're far and away the best team in the ACC.
Yeah.
I think Virginia maybe could have been, but when you miss that much time, after the season begins,
I still think Virginia needs to gel, though. I like Jay Huff and T.Hay Clark's playing really well.
They need to gel, but you can't gel if you're not
hasn't
playing.
Quite figured it out,
right?
Right.
But that's the project.
There's plenty of time.
There is, but they've already missed so much time. Yeah. And here's the thing, man: we don't even know how they're going to do ACC tournament seeds because. I guess they'll just do it off winning percentage, but not everybody's going to play 20 games in the ACC.
Right.
These games are not going to get made up, most likely. You're already playing 2 games a week.
Yeah, technically the Tech UVA game was postponed, but
when are they going to replay it?
Yeah,
right, or maybe there is a weekend there. Generally, each ACC team has a bye week where they only play 1 game a week instead of 2, right? So, okay, maybe you could fit it in there if they're doing that this year. I haven't closely examined the schedule because what's the point of closely examining the schedule this year?
Yeah.
I just don't see, especially with teams that have more than 1 game postponed. I don't see how you're gonna get 20 games in. Some team will get 20 in. And another team's going to get like 14 or 15 in. And you're just going to have to base the ACC tournament seedings on, winning percentage and all that. And who gets into the NCAA tournament? Oh, this team played 25 games. This team played 18 games.
Well,
so this team
It's
went.
the old Ohio State
I was
football
about, if you look at the
debate.
college football playoff, I think they're going to put the best. I mean,
Well, this team went 12-6. This team went
8-5,
18-6.
yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Or 18-4 or something like that. So it used to be everybody played pretty much the same amount of games, and this year it's going to be so wildly different. So I think that selection committee is going to meet. Well, not meet, but they're all going to get together on
They'll
Zoom.
get on a Zoom call.
You're going to be like, you know what? We're just going to go heavily by the net rankings this year.
So hang that thing on the wall and let's throw darts at it.
Exactly.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Virginia Tech plays Louisville on Wednesday. That'll be their first game of 2021. The Hokies are 8-1 and 2-0 in ACC play, with wins over then 24th ranked Clemson and Miami. So let's transition quickly we went from the gridiron to the hardwood to the octagon mat, which was debuted inside of Castle Coliseum on Saturday. A new mat for 8th ranked Virginia Tech
octagon?
Wrestling. It's an octagon. And
Is it really? I didn't notice that.
it looks like a stop sign. It's really cool.
I noticed it was kind of shiny. One of the pictures that was taken had a lot of reflection off of it.
And my analyst on Saturday, Daryl Weber's national champion, was actually saying that that's a lot of international wrestling. That's the way the mat is shaped. And so he was complimenting Virginia Tech and Tony Roby of like trying to develop wrestlers right on the international stage to have a mat that is similar to that is really cool. So I was seeing some comments on Twitter. I don't know if this is true, but it might be the only mat of its kind for college wrestling. So it was debuted on Saturday. 28-6 win for Virginia Tech over a Campbell team that was ranked as high as 12th in the country last year.
Really?
So they've won a couple of SoCon championships the last couple of years. Well-respected wrestling program that's on the rise. Will, you covered the match. Thoughts on Virginia Tech's season opening win?
10 wrestlers, 10 weight classes, and Tech had 5 freshmen wrestling. I think 2 of them were true, and 3 of them were red shirts. So if you don't follow wrestling, the red shirts actually get to wrestle while they're red shirting. They wrestle unattached. Like all 3 guys probably had multiple matches last year. So you have an idea of how good the red shirt guys are. And some of them, I think, even come out of those years nationally ranked because of what they did while they were red shirting and wrestling unattached. But then you have the true freshmen. You don't know what you're getting there. And so the two true freshmen were Sam Heligas out of Pennsylvania, 157-5 with 2 state championships or 3?
2 state championships.
And he opens up by pinning his opponent early in probably about midway through the second period. And who was the other true freshman?
Andy Smith from Christiansburg High School.
Yeah.
Do you know that Christiansburg High School holds the VHSL record for most consecutive state championships, I believe, of any sport? They won state titles from 2002 to 2018 consecutively.
2002 to 2018. Didn't their coach used to be like at Grundy or something like that? Is that ringing a bell?
I do know that.
Oh yeah, I think
Dresser used to coach at Christiansburg before he coached at Virginia Tech.
right.
Now I'm just making a fool out of myself.
No, I'm pretty sure the
Christiansburg
Christiansburg program. Maybe it was Dresser himself.
Because I think, and this is going pretty far back for me.
I'm pretty sure you're right.
The premier program in the state was actually, I think, at Grundy.
Grundy in the west, and I think Great Bridge in the east.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did I get off topic on that? So they've actually got 2 wrestlers from Christiansburg High School.
Yes.
The other one is Hunter. Is it pronounced Bolin?
Bolin. He's from Floyd, but he went to Christiansburg.
Right. To participate in the program there. So Tech has, of course, Mekhi Lewis returned to the mat. He's ranked number 1 in the country in his weight class. Bolin is ranked number 2 in the country in his weight class. And then you got Corbin Myers came back after being gone for a year. You got some other solid wrestlers. And then you got 5 freshmen. Mm-hmm. So I think their best years are ahead of them. Bolin is a junior.
Believe so. Redshirt junior.
Mekhi is still a sophomore. So I think their best as a team, I think their best wrestling is still ahead of them. So you hear that the number 8, yada, yada, yada. But I think Tony's just, and tell me whether or not you agree with this, Evan, I think Tony's just now getting the pieces in place. And he's recruiting depth also.
Well, you're starting to reap the benefits of the really good recruiting classes that he's had, right? Yeah. The best that Virginia Tech Wrestling's ever signed a year ago. So Connor Brady, despite a loss against someone pointed it out on the wrestling board, Barton, who he wrestled, a redshirt senior, is a very experienced wrestler who's won a SoCon championship. He's going to be really good at 57, Connor Brady. He was one of the biggest recruits in program history. Sam Hilligus in Pennsylvania. For those that don't know, Pennsylvania high school wrestling is just the best of the best. To go 157-5 in your career with 2 state titles is incredible. He's going to be really good. And I think the name to look out for this year for Virginia Tech wrestling is Sam Latona at 125. He went 20-2 wrestling unattached. He placed 6th at the senior national event a couple of months ago. Redshirt freshman from Alabaster, Alabama. I think that with Myers back at 133, the town of Latona at 125, it's a different looking lineup for Virginia Tech, right? No David McFadden. But I think that this has a lot of talent and can contend for an ACC title this year. So I thought it was a pretty good opening showing for Virginia Tech wrestling on Saturday. I really did. They won 8 of the 10 matches. So
yes,
and again Campbell wrestled hard. There was a lot of decisions. There was not a lot of bonus point victories. A lot of decisions. I mean, I thought Campbell was a pretty good opponent for Virginia Tech to open up their season against.
Yeah, you and Daryl kept saying, the score doesn't really indicate how close this was and how heavily contested it was. And the one that worries me was Bolin. Bolin was up 4-1 after one period. He had 2:25 in riding time, and then he basically got ridden for the next 4 minutes of the match. And got called for stalling. Mm-hmm. So he was up 4-1 and he wound up winning 4-3, but he did nothing the last 2 periods. So that one worries me a little bit.
And I think he'll, getting back on the mat first time, again, first duel in 10 months, I think he's going to be all right. But you're right. That was one that I think on paper, that was an opportunity for him to win bonus points. He only won that 4-3 in a decision.
Yeah, he's ranked number 2 wrestling an unranked wrestler.
Correct. Yeah. He was wrestling someone from Palmer, Alaska. Ever heard of Palmer, Alaska, anybody?
No.
It was one of my favorite parts of prep.
I've heard of Alaska.
All right.
So Campbell actually has 2 brothers from Palmer, Alaska wrestling.
My only stat that I did not get to throw in there. So anytime there's somebody from a random hometown and I'm doing play-by-play, I love to do some interesting prep on that hometown. Uh-huh. And sometimes you don't get to use all your prep. From Palmer, Alaska, there's a record. Somebody in 2008 at a state fair in Palmer, 78-pound cabbage.
Ugh, that's a lot of coleslaw.
No. I was really looking forward to throwing that in there, so I'm throwing it on the Tech Sideline podcast now. All right, we got a bunch of
How big is that?
That's what I'm saying. I wish there was a picture. There was not a picture. We've got a lot of questions here on our YouTube chat. It's our favorite part of the show where you get to interact with Chris and Will.
You guys can take it. I need to go take a break, but you can keep going.
Sounds good. Chris has waited here patiently throughout the wrestling talk. So let's go ahead, get some questions. If you haven't asked, go ahead and throw it in the chat. Jacob Yates, what is the ceiling for this current basketball team, in your opinion?
The ceiling is, man, it's so hard to say because I think they could make a deep postseason run because they have more depth. But, I also could see them getting knocked out early. You could wind up in the Elite Eight this year because you have a couple teams who have to forfeit because they have COVID cases, right?
Right.
I think it's I think their ceiling this year is some form of NCAA tournament. That's the highest point. And then after this year, you start talking about making deep runs in the NCAA tournament. I think that's the way it'll work out.
I think the ceiling for this team in the ACC, I think the ceiling is a top 3 regular season finish off of winning percentage. I know we don't know what exactly. Yeah. I really do think that's a possibility because I agree with you that Florida State's the best team in the conference. But UVA, who knows? Duke, are they going to turn the corner? I think here's the thing about Virginia Tech, right? It's a blessing and a curse. If they don't shoot the 3-ball well, they struggle. But if they get hot at the right time,
mm-hmm.
and you never know what can happen.
And even when they don't shoot it well, they can still win because they can actually score inside this year. They have, Naheem Aline can beat guys off the dribble and score. Ideally, this is where you miss Jada to a certain extent because if the 3-point shot isn't falling, then he's one of those guys who can beat people off the dribble and score around the rim. But they've got enough size this year, and they've got enough players that if somebody's having an off night, you can take that guy out.
Depth,
right?
Yep.
It's good to have depth. And I know everybody is like, when is Ojiako going to play? When is Ojiako going to play? At this point, Virginia Tech is 8-1 without him. Like, do you really want to just throw a guy on there who hasn't played competitive basketball in almost a year on an 8-1 team?
It's 2-0 in league play.
Right. Do you really want to mess up that chemistry?
Yeah.
For a guy that you don't know how he's going to play? Like, I don't know that's like in a regular year, you just redshirt, right? Because there's just no point in him playing at this point. But and I think that's the way I see it now. Like what's the point? Like, you're going to take Aluma out of the game,
right?
To put in an injured sophomore just for the sake of doing so? No. You don't want to get into the situation where you have too many players, because you could just mess up chemistry there.
I think you ought to redshirt Ojiako.
Well, we mentioned that you would in a normal year, but this year doesn't count.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Brett Johnson asks, thoughts on Torian Gray being let go by the University of Florida, and do you think Virginia Tech should look at bringing him back? And let me throw another question on there at the end. Do you think he winds up at South Carolina with Shane Beamer?
There's always been rumors that Shane would try to get him as defensive coordinator.
Oh, yeah?
and
Which he has not hired a defensive coordinator at this point.
Right. Would it be a bad – so he actually did get fired?
The wording on it was –
contract not renewed?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's
Give me a minute to look it up. I'm pretty sure that kind of was the wording. But, again, Florida did struggle in their bowl game. Oklahoma put up a lot of points. So
okay. They struggled in a bowl game where half their team's out.
Yeah.
Who cares? I mean, I know Florida fans are mad or intense and everything like that, but you can't judge anybody based on – you can't – even in a normal year, you can't judge people based on one bowl game.
The wording was sourced to ESPN. Florida Gators fire secondary coaches Ron English and Torian Gray.
Yeah, I don't know. Wouldn't shock me to see him end up on that South Carolina staff. Look, that means there's got to be an opening on Virginia Tech staff to hire him. Right?
And there's
so that means you fire Ryan Smith or you fire Justin Hamilton. I
laugh because you're not firing Justin Hamilton.
You're going to fire one Tech grad just to bring another Tech grad back. Right. And you bring T. Gray back as cornerbacks coach, you'd have to fire Ryan Smith. Okay, let's say you do that. Let's go ahead and Ryan Smith, who did such an awesome job recruiting for us this year, in my opinion,
and filling in as interim defensive coordinator.
Right. So now all of a sudden, okay, let's just say you do fire him just for the sake of hiring Torian Gray, and Torian comes back and he's your cornerbacks coach. Torian's been coaching college football for 15 years, and all of a sudden he's subordinate to Justin Hamilton, who's the defensive coordinator, who's been coaching college football for like 3 years, at least at this level, right? So there's a certain level of seniority there that it's kind of strange. So no, I don't think it's going to happen.
No.
I think he'll end up in South Carolina. This could even be a thing of Florida being mad at him. Maybe he's already agreed to be Shane Beamer's defensive coordinator.
And they found out about it.
Yeah, who knows?
Shane, I actually watched, for some reason, Shane's press conference of introducing about 5 or 6, maybe 7 people to his staff. And this was before the news of Torian Gray.
And the DC was not one of them?
Correct.
Right.
That was going to be my next question.
But now if he did want to hire Torian Gray as defensive coordinator, then now you kind of have to explain to the Florida fan base why you just hired Florida's fired cornerbacks coach to be your defensive coordinator.
Explain to the South Carolina fan base.
It could be a chess game, right? I mean,
it's the SEC, man.
So let's see. The thing is, it's unlikely that he will go unemployed.
Oh yeah.
But if he were to go unemployed, there's more money coming in for analyst positions at Virginia Tech. Would he have a place here as an analyst?
Tom Lester writes, did Chris Coleman opt out today or taking a redshirt year, ?
Chris Coleman is overslept. This is like the 4th time in the last month I've actually turned the alarm off on my on my phone, and then I wake up and the phone's in the bed with me, and I don't remember any of it. Last night I actually fell asleep reading a book because the book was in the bed with me when I woke up this morning too. And I was doing laundry, and I never finished the laundry, so I had to come here with wet jeans on.
Goodness.
Today. And because all my jeans were in the laundry last night.
All of them, okay.
Yeah, so I couldn't quite finish them. So
let's get people in the feed to tell a story. When I started working as an engineer in Charlottesville, my first ever business trip, we were supposed to travel from Charlottesville to Newport News Shipbuilding, and I overslept. And my boss and 2 other senior people at the company I was working at were waiting for me to get out of bed and show up. And that's like the worst oversleeping story I have. So if you're in the YouTube feed and you've got an oversleeping story that turned out to be a disaster for you, this is not a disaster. This is not a big deal.
5 minutes away.
If you've got a disaster oversleeping story, tell it.
We have a wrestling question from Justin Thomas. It was very interesting to see so many young wrestlers get the start on Saturday. Do you know if the starting lineup from Saturday is intended to be the core group for the season? I would go ahead and say, to my knowledge, I would think that that's going to be a lot of the same. The wrestler I'm personally curious to see if he'll start some duels is Colin Girardi, who was an NCAA qualifier at 133 from last year. Of course, Corbin Myers coming back, got granted a 6 year of eligibility. Girardi's very talented. Does he get any work at 141, 133? These are questions I don't know the answer to, and I would love to ask Coach Roby.
So Joey Prada's still on the team, right?
And Joey Prada's still on the team.
Has he been bypassed, though?
I believe Latona has taken over at 125. They did have a couple of matches after the duel on Saturday that counts for records this year, because you have to have at least 4 matches in to qualify for the NCAA tournament. Prada won at 125. So those are, again, 2 wrestlers to keep an eye on. Will they get any action? Prada and but again, Sam Latona's wrestling really well right now at 25.
Yeah.
And Corbin Myers a 3-time NCAA qualifier. So a lot of options for Tony Roby at this point. So great question, Justin. Appreciate it. Let's go to Billy Parvadum. He writes, would you say the biggest failure of Fuente's tenure has been an inability to develop a successful quarterback? Seems the only solid one was Evans. He was hyped as a quarterback guru coming in with Dalton and Paxton Lynch at Memphis.
I would say the number one issue has been inconsistent discipline and off-season buy-in and things like that, and just overall
that's
too many
what
guys
has emerged,
not looking the part. I do think the quarterback development thing, I do think it's probably an issue.
Well, it's been a revolving door, and it's difficult to...
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it is. I mean, he had Gerard Evans for 1 year, and then he had Josh Jackson the next year, and then it looked like he was going to have Jackson again the next year, and then Jackson got hurt in like the 3rd or 4th game. And then he had Ryan Willis the rest of that year, and then it looked like he was going to have Ryan Willis last year, and then Willis took a step back and got benched.
Got hurt
/ benched. Hendon Hooker takes over in Game 5, has a pretty good year, so it looks like it's going to be Hendon Hooker for the 2nd straight year. And I remember writing articles before the season or at the end of last year saying, hopefully, finally, Virginia Tech's going to have the same starting quarterback for 2 years in a row. And then, bam, Hooker has his COVID issues at the beginning of the season, so Burmeister's the starter. Then it's Hooker again. Then at the end of the season, it's Burmeister again. I'll say I hope Tech's quarterbacks next year is Braxton Burmeister for 12 games.
All year long, please. And I hope Virginia Tech, I hope they can have a spring practice so Burmeister can get more time to learn the system and everything like Chris,
that.
it keeps going back to that. We saw Burmeister progressing through his reads against UVA.
Yeah, no, take that with a caveat. Caveat is UVA has by far the worst pass defense in the ACC. Not even close. There's no close.
But going through your reads is more a thing of, are you getting rushed?
Yeah, you're right. But still, he had a really good game against UVA. But you also have to recognize that it's UVA. But yes, you're right.
So would you say? The question was, is that the biggest failing?
I don't know. So, no, I don't think it's the biggest failing. But I do think it's up there. Like, look, Ryan Willis is a really talented player. That guy was 6'4", 225 or 30 pounds, so he's got the size. He was a good athlete. He had fairly nimble feet. He could run. Remember that 4th and 11 scramble against UNC or whatever? Remember when he first came in against ODU and ran the read option for like 30 yards? They were surprised
by how fast he was.
Holy crap, that guy's faster than Josh.
He's no Josh Jackson.
Right. Well, he was, right? He was faster than Josh Jackson. And man, he could throw the ball a mile. I mean, that guy can make any throw on the field. He had all the physical tools to be there to be a really, really good quarterback. And he was a pretty good quarterback for Tech as a junior. He just needed to improve his decision-making on the read option and things like that. Instead of taking a step forward, he took a step back. And I know, yes, he was hurt and everything like that. But there were decisions he was making that I don't think were injury-dependent. I will say,
and I will add this to the discussion. If you want the Virginia Tech football program to turn around from a 5-win season and do something better, I think it needs to begin with consistency at the quarterback position. But I think just as important or more important is the off-season buy-in to strength and conditioning and nutrition.
You're not going to have consistent football seasons until you have consistent off seasons. And the bottom line is when your car is running rough, you don't know what's wrong with it, but you know it's running rough and something's broken and something needs to be fixed. You know, when you're trying to figure out what it is, you don't just circle the car and look at it and say, "Oh, what a nice looking car! I can't figure out what's wrong with it."
We'll just keep driving.
We'll just keep driving. No, you open the hood, you look under the hood and figure it out, right? Well, whatever. Generally speaking, and Urban Meyer said this, and he's right. Generally speaking, whenever there's something wrong with a football program, it's not something you can see from the outside. You don't just walk around Lane Stadium and the Merriman Center and say, "Oh, looks great to me," right? No, you have to look inside it. And whatever issues there are with the Virginia Tech football program, I guarantee you that they're much, much more important than what Brad Cornelson makes on 3rd down. That's just what fans can see, so that's the only thing they can talk about. It's much like Virginia Tech used to win 10 games every year, partly because the ACC wasn't very good, but partly because they were so strong in their off seasons. And there was nothing broken under the hood. The only thing broken was actually the offensive coaching staff.
Actually the play.
Well, it was actually the things that the fans could see. But Tech had an FCS level offensive coaching staff there for a while, and they still won 10 games every year because everything under the hood was so strong. I'm telling you, like Brad Cornelson is like here's my list of things wrong, and Brad Cornelson's right about here.
Yeah,
you know. So and the thing is, we're not going to be able to know. It's not like we can go in there and watch and see what they're doing.
You won't know until they run out there in the fall.
And Justin Fuente writes "Turn Up the Wick" too and tells everything, right?
Gentlemen, we are 93 minutes in.
Wow.
We have a lot of great questions still. So
that's fine.
Are you going to be in town this week in Blacksburg?
I was going to talk to you about that afterwards. It is my father's birthday on Thursday, but I was planning on maybe coming back on Friday. We can talk. We can figure it out. I was hoping
we need to do a questions only podcast.
Oh, I would love that.
Yeah.
Well, Clark Ruland's got a great podcast. Mr. 804 about basketball. Terrific question in the chat. I've got a question from JPCVT that I wanted to get in, but just
all right. I tell you what. Go ahead and ask them, and we will answer them in 2 minutes or less.
Okay. All right, here we go. Let's start with Mr. 804, Chris.
We'll try to ask.
Do you think more teams will press due to difficulties getting the ball past half court at critical points in the game?
Oh, I think that kind of depends on the personnel of the other team. I think for a tall, experienced team like Florida State, and I have no idea what Florida State's tendencies are to press, might be a good idea to throw all those long arms and all those long athletes at Virginia Tech. But, you know, if you're Duke and you got a bunch of freshmen who don't even know how to play half-court basketball yet, then maybe it's not such a good idea.
Solid point. Okay. And I think that's where Jada may be missed, is getting the ball.
That's a good point.
Back to football, Clark Ruland. According to website, Tech is slated to open against an ACC opponent. Currently,
next year? Okay.
Yes. Currently, Duke, Georgia Tech, Miami, Pittsburgh, and Syracuse already have non-conference games that day. The remaining ACC opponents on the list are UNC at home or at Boston College. Which would you rather have? And then he also says, doubt it's UVA.
Well, somebody said on the message boards that they could see that UNC game being a Labor Day night game in Lane Stadium.
Yes, and hopefully, and we're always better.
Hopefully fans will
For
be
Virginia
there.
Tech, Fuente and his staff are always better in that opening game, right?
So that would be interesting.
You don't want to go to Chestnut Hill to open the season? Is that what you're saying?
I haven't been to Chestnut
we tried
Hill.
that last year. It didn't work out too well. Tried that in 1995. It didn't work out too well. These opening games against Boston College generally don't turn out too well. So, yeah, let's go UNC.
No more BC.
All right, final question. Y'all are rocking and rolling here. JPCVT on Twitter. I'd like to get Chris and Will's thoughts about whether or not they agree with Witt's decision, as well as Justin's, to make no changes to coaching staff or personnel following the season. I recall Chris saying after the UVA game that he thought Justin would be in favor of doing so if it meant keeping his job, but by all accounts that wasn't demanded of him by Witt. As a fan who isn't necessarily thrilled that Fuente is staying, I'm a bit perplexed that he is being allowed to keep everything as is.
Well, we don't yet know that he is. But no, let's rewind. Back when Frank Beamer demoted Brian Seinspring and fired the other offensive coaches and then brought in Loeffler and Grimes and Moorhead, he did not make those announcements until after signing day in February.
In February.
Right? So he let that entire recruiting class get signed, and then like a week later he was like, oh, by the way, we're firing all these coaches. And
right. And so your first instinct is to say, but the February signing day isn't a big thing anymore, but the transfer portal is.
Right.
Now the portal is an ongoing thing.
Yeah,
it's not like there's a date, you know.
So I don't know that he is, and I'm not saying that he will. I'm just saying that we don't know the whole story yet. We don't know the whole story yet. We don't know if somebody's going to maybe hire Tracy Claeys as their defensive coordinator or something like that. We don't know how much money Tech has right now in terms of buyouts. We do know there's a football program enhancement fund. We don't know how much of that money is already available, how much of it will be available. We heard that there was some concern that some of those big donors were going to pull their money back and not donate it anymore when they found out Fuente was retained. So there's a whole lot of unknown there, and
I do know that Witt and Fuente have reached out to that group of donors that is providing the football enhancement fund. That they did make an effort and reach out and talk to him individually or as a group. I have not had a chance to find out yet how that went. I'm going to find that out later this week. I think, as I've said, cooler heads will prevail, and folks who are interested in supporting the program will do so, whether they're on board with this staff or Fuente is their guy or whatever.
Generally speaking, if you're in a position where you've got a lot of money, that means you didn't make unemotional decisions with your money.
You make long-term investments.
Right, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
All right, so let's close the podcast with some news. I've been saying all podcasts that there would be likely a new AP men's basketball poll that would come out at some point. We're going to be able to finish the podcast with
number
the new
21.
Poll. What do you say? You said 21. What do you think, Chris? They were
without
at
looking at it.
24.
I have no idea what everybody else did. I'll go 22.
Virginia Tech is tied with Clemson for the highest-ranked ACC team at 19th.
So what did Florida State do this week? Did they lose this weekend?
Not 100% sure. The poll is this with ACC schools. Virginia Tech and Clemson tied at 19. Duke 21st. Virginia 22nd. And Florida State 25th.
No, here's the thing. What were we, 21st?
No, 24th.
20. We're 20. No, I'm sorry. What are we now?
We're now 19th. Virginia Tech is now 19th.
19th, and that's number 1 in the ACC.
Tied.
That should be like 4th in the ACC, to be honest with you.
Oh,
the
no,
ACC
yeah.
is bad this year.
Yeah.
I think I was watching, the Tech Miami game, and they talked about like the last time the ACC didn't have a top 15 team was like 1994 or 1996 or something like that. So this is kind of historic. And you saw when the Big Ten just blew away the ACC in almost every single game.
Yeah.
I mean, that wasn't even close. So
Eric Fisher, FSU lost at Clemson. So that's why the Tigers have jumped as well.
So it was Clemson that beat him, right? Okay.
Correct. And Virginia Tech beat Clemson about 2
Thanks,
weeks
Eric, because
ago.
we couldn't remember.
yeah.
Eric Fisher, he's like an esteemed colleague supporter of the podcast.
Right.
He's going to catch us if we fall. So.
Always there.
Okay, long podcast today, but our first one in nearly 2 weeks. Gentlemen, great to be back.
I like those Q&As. Maybe one week we should.
We need to do an entire podcast.
I think
Well, let me finish. Let me do my thought here. All right, I normally write out a Friday Q&A. Maybe we should do a subscribers only podcast Q&A, where we don't do it live and we just unlist the video on YouTube and make it subscribers only.
Well, if we want to have a session on the air right now, I mean, the only thing that we have going on this week, right, is men's basketball on Wednesday against Louisville. So that might be something. Yeah, let's go ahead and chime in the chat if you'd be interested in that. But I think that'd be great. We've been streaming 97 minutes. We have 11 likes. If you're watching on YouTube, please just hit that like button.
Yeah, we definitely need more likes.
And more subscribers, please help us out as we stream each and every show here on our YouTube page. All right, Chris, I've been looking forward for the last 2 weeks to ask this question because I wake up in the morning, I go to TechSideline.com, and I get all of my content, and I think, gosh, I can't wait for the week ahead. It's coming up on TSL.
And I know your question, and I can tell you right now, I have no idea. It's all right. At some point, I'm going to post a Jason Stame article later today. At some point this week, the offensive recruits article will get written. I'm going to be doing an interview with former Western Branch head coach Lou Johnston, who's recently written a book.
Right?
Yes, and he coached guys like Keith Burnell and Vince Hall and things like that, and that will get turned into an article at some point, although I don't know when. There will be a Friday Q&A. There will be coverage of the Louisville game, assuming the Louisville game happens. And, poor Jake went to all that effort to research UVA and write a UVA game preview, and then the game didn't even get played.
It only takes Jake like 15 minutes, though.
Jake Lyman, he's a stud.
So I will say that Chris is going to be on his own pretty much for a while because we're getting ready to open the new additional office right next door for Tech Sideline. We've got furniture in and lighting in.
Looks so good.
Computers are coming this week. So I think by Friday we'll be up and running in that, and then we'll be able to redo this room here and enhance the audio-video capability that we've got here. And 2021 is going to be a year of change and growth for Tech Sideline, and that is going to require a ton of work by yours truly behind the scenes. You won't see me writing articles. I'll write articles here and there, but you're not going to see me much as far as producing content. I will hang out on the boards, but I have a lot of work to do over the next few months to prepare Tech Sideline for next fall and really for the next 10 years, as I like to put it. So I got a lot of stuff that's been swimming around in my head all through football season and all over the holidays, and now I got to get to work on it. So it's a time of growth and expansion for us, and we're really excited about it.
Absolutely love it. All right, great show. Thanks for sticking around a little bit longer. Great to have everybody back with us in the YouTube chat. We look forward to a great 2021 new year here at Tech Sideline. All right, that'll do it for us. Episode 160 of the Tech Sideline podcast. For our managing editor, Chris Coleman, our founder and general manager, Will Stewart, the best podcast producer in the land, Malcolm Stewart. I'm your podcast host, Evan Hughes, saying so long, and thanks so much for watching and listening to episode 160 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Have a great week, Hokies.